to the Quantum Mechanics.
Yes, we are the Quantum Mechanics, the paranormal podcast for the believers, the doubters, and everybody in between. Apologies for the frog in my throat, which will be persistent throughout this. You know what winter's like. It's a cold. Sorry.
Yes, he's got a couple of frog's legs coming out of his mouth. I can see them.
Oui, monsieur. Oui, monsieur. And just before we crack on, matter of business, thank you to Karen for joining as a mechanics assistant this week at patreon.com/TQM pod.
Thank you, Karen. That's great.
You know everything you get. You get early access. You get it ad-free. You get the Discord server. And you get to support your favourite podcast.
And you get our exclusive Patreon episode.
Oh, yes, of course you do.
Ben and Peter's Extra Scoop.
How could I forget? Of course you do.
Get that.
Sorry.
Shall we go for it today?
Yeah, let's do it.
So this episode came about because of a number of threads that I've been thinking about, Ben. And really the fact that there are a number of paranormal stories that we, and I guess those who listen to us, love, basically. Whether it's the Enfield Poltergeist or Jeff the Talking Mongoose or the Lonnie Zamora UFO case.
Yeah, all my favourites.
And I was thinking about these stories and why they appeal so much to us. You know, what raises them above other paranormal tales.
Yeah.
This also got me thinking about the difference between true, quote-unquote, paranormal stories and fiction. In terms of structure and storytelling, is there a difference? And, you know, is that a factor, whether it's supposed to be a true story or whether it's a work of fiction? Now, we're going to explore some of those themes later in the episode. But to set us up for that discussion, I thought we could look at one of the most well-known ghost stories out there. And one I know we both love, but we've never covered on the podcast as far as I remember before. I guess because we're a bit resistant to cover those more well-known cases sometimes. But by exploring what makes the perfect real ghost story, I thought it'd give us a good excuse to have a look at the tale of the Bell Witch.
Bingo! I love this tale, and the amount of times I've started to look at covering it, it's quite a complicated story, and I guess I never got around to it, but yeah, I'm very pleased that you're covering it.
Yeah, well, The Bell Witch is a story with a wide range of characters, as you say, and it's quite a complex narrative. There's some, I don't know, what you would describe as maybe tall tales in it. It takes place on the banks of Red River in Robinson County in the sleepy town in Adams, Tennessee. Has the population of 624, and yeah, you might think that's an area that would get overlooked or wouldn't be a hotbed of paranormal activity. However, for many decades, the town has captured the attention of ghost hunters, historians, and paranormal enthusiasts from all over the world. Why? Because it is the site of the infamous haunting of the Bell Witch. It's been called America's greatest ghost story, and in the decades since the witch, or spirit, first manifested around the Bell family on their farm in Robinson County in the early 19th century, the Bell Witch has attracted the attention of, ghost hunters, skeptics, supernaturalists, religious leaders, storytellers, authors, historians, and I guess curious citizens from all over the world. Lots of people go and visit there, especially the cave. Now, according to Tennessee State Archives, early sources of the Bell Witch legend, they say, are dubious at best, but provide a terrific look into the pervasiveness of the legend and the progression of the Bell Witch story through the years. Now, I guess the two most famous sources are an authenticated history of the famous Bell Witch by M.V. Ingram, which was published in 1894, and A Mysterious Spirit, the Bell Witch of Tennessee, by Charles Bailey Bell. That's a great name, isn't it? They're basically the same narrative, Ben. There are some slight differences in the way the story's told, and some of the details are slightly different, but I think the main difference is in terms of style, really, in terms of how the books are written. But both these sources tell a fascinating story of the supernatural and provide the basis for much of the Bell Witch folklore. So let's take a look at the protagonist in the legend, the Bell family. John Bell was born in Halifax County, North Carolina in 1750, the son of William Bell and Anne Jones. In 1782, John Bell married Lucy Williams, daughter of a prominent farmer, John Williams. The Bells bought a farm in Edgecombe County and began amassing wealth and influence in the area. In 1804, the family consisted of John and Lucy Bell and their children. There's quite a long list of children here. Jesse, John Jr., Drury,
John Jr.
Benjamin, Esther, Zadok, Elizabeth, Richard Williams, and Joel Egbert.
I'm disappointed there's no Andrew, because then all of his friends could have done...
Abel.
Exactly.
Yeah. I guess the families were bigger in those days, weren't they? I'm not sure.
That one's huge.
I'm not sure all their children did survive to adulthood, but I think a lot of them did.
You couldn't even get them in a Touran.
You really couldn't, could you? Now, some of the descendants of the Bells still live in Tennessee to this day. Our story really begins with father of the family, John Bell, walking the grounds of his farm. John spotted what he described as a dog-like creature.
It's a werewolf.
This was no ordinary wild dog. It had something of the supernatural about it.
Get the scat.
Others in the family who saw the beast described it as having 2 heads.
Oh, that's very supernatural.
Very supernatural, right? As the dog approached John, fear gripped him. He raised his shotgun and fired at the beast, but no wound was inflicted. It just vanished in front of his eyes.
Classic.
In the days that followed, other family members, Drury and Betsy, would spot the 2-headed beast roaming the grounds of the farm. But Ben, the 2-headed dog, was just the start of the horror that was to follow, as the paranormal activity moved inside the Bell family home.
A 3-headed hamster.
That would be brilliant. To go with the frog in your throat. Those who had seen the beast started to hear unearthly noises while in the farmhouse. There would be the sound of knocking at the doors and windows, but no one was there. Awakened from their sleep, they heard the sound of wings flapping at the ceiling and rats gnawing at the bedposts. The sounds then became more disturbing, more frightening. The sound of choking and strangling could be heard, along with chains dragging and heavy objects hitting the floor. Sounds emanated from the bedroom as if beds were suddenly and roughly pulled apart, to which was added the sound of fighting dogs chained together, making the whole noise deafening. That seems pretty scary, doesn't it?
That's the chains noise back again.
Yeah. Well, in all the cases of the sounds, there was no rational explanation that could be put together for them. No rats were found in the home, despite thorough searching, and no damage to the furniture was ever discovered. The family did not speak to their neighbours about the strange sounds in their house for fear of being ridiculed or labelled mad. Then, Ben, she came. Or should I say, it came. The spirit, or witch, as it's been called both, made their presence known. One night, it spoke to the family, declaring, "I am the spirit of a person who was buried in the woods nearby, and the grave was disturbed. My bones disinterred and scattered, and one of my teeth was lost under the house. I am here looking for that tooth."
So how's it talking? Through what?
It's just you could just hear it out loud. Apparently.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That is so similar to Jeff the Mongoose.
I was thinking that when I was working on this. I mentioned Jeff a couple of times though, as I was thinking of it, definitely. Because it wasn't the only time that this witch spoke to them. It would talk to the family, even engage in conversation. So there was two-way conversation, apparently.
Cup of tea? Yeah, please.
Yeah.
You haven't seen my tooth, have you? No.
I've been looking for a tooth forever. Though scared, there was something intriguing, even exciting about these exchanges with the entity, but that was about to change. The witch was not content with words alone. Its anger needed another release. It began to physically attack members of the family. Joel, Richard Williams, and especially Betsy got the worst of it, being struck, pinched, and having their hair pulled relentlessly by the Bell witch. But the witch seemed to favour Lucy Bell and her son John Jr. They were left relatively unharmed by the entity. fact, the spirit was so impressed by John's wife Lucy, it voiced her praise for the mother, describing her as the most perfect woman living.
Again, so Jeff-like.
The witch showed a great deal of compassion towards her, even caring for her and singing to her while she was ill. It's a real difference between some in the family and others. Really interesting. And like you said, that kind of almost randomness of Jeff in that, isn't there?
And she's whistling through her missing tooth. But that is so strange. But also, it's really disconcerting, that kind of, I love you, but I will kill you.
Absolutely.
Which is something that came through with Jeff, because he would have lovely conversations and then suddenly say, you know, I could do something to those children and you'd never seen them again.
Yeah.
Really deep, dark stuff.
Yeah. Well,
that's fascinating.
Yeah, and that difference between how some of the children were treated and others. So John Jr. would hold long, intense conversations with the witch, who never hurt him, even though he would declare her to be the spirit of the damned. But he wasn't hurt.
Oh, okay.
So he could even insult her, but it still wasn't. The witch showed her powers in other ways. There's something a bit Jeff-like about this next bit as well. On one famous occasion, the witch recited perfectly the sermon of Reverend James Gunn of Bethel Methodist Church, and then recited the sermon of Sug Fort, despite the fact they had originally been given at the same time, more than 12 miles apart. That reminded me of Jeff going to the houses and describing the inside, you know, that's
Yes, and describing the papers from the next day.
Yeah. Some say at their wits' end, the family engaged the services of Dr. Miz, who claimed he could exorcise the ghost and free the family from their torment. Though he arrived with much bravado, Dr. Miz quickly fled in fear. He was no match for the Bell Witch. Though many in the family were haunted by the witch, it was Betsy Bell who seemed to suffer the most. The verbal and physical attacks on her were almost consistent. The spirit seemed determined to wreck Betsy's life. This was especially the case with Betsy's love life, Ben. Betsy was set to marry her childhood sweetheart, Joshua Gardner, but the witch was vehemently opposed. Betsy was so afraid about what might happen to her and her sweetheart, she cancelled her wedding plans for fear of reprisals and broke off the engagement.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, that's power, isn't it?
I mean, I can understand why you would get that worried about it, but okay, so it's really having an impact on
her
real world lives now.
Especially her. It all became too much for Betsy, and she decided to take time away from the farmhouse, but the witch followed her, continuing her taunts. Betsy described one incident, saying, "When the spirit became so tantalising, filling my mind with horror and causing me to become so nervous, my parents often sent me to a neighbour's to rest for a night. My first night away from home was spent with Thenny Thorne. When we retired, there came a loud knocking on our outside door, which seemed to fly open, and a great gust of wind was felt. Thenny sprang up at once and lit a candle. To our surprise, the door was not open. Then a voice spoke softly. 'Betsy, you should not have come here. You know I can follow you anywhere. Now get a good night's sleep.'" Again, that mischievous nature.
That's I don't like the sound of that. That is just, it's intimidating.
A soft hand then patted my cheek, and the voice again assured us that we would not be disturbed anymore that night.
Oh, that's generous of you.
It's a real power play, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
The Bells, fearful of the impact this was having on the daughter Betsy, enlisted the help of a family friend called Frank Mills. Frank promised to protect Betsy from any further abuse by the spirit. Betsy said Frank was the most powerful man any of us ever saw, and just as fearless as any living man. One time he said to me, "Come sit by me, little sister, nothing will bother you while I am here." The witch responded immediately, "You go home, you can do no good here." And then the witch was right. Frank Mills could not protect Betsy. The thought that he could enraged the spirit. The entity began slapping Betsy, pulling her hair. Then the witch turned on Frank Mills, knocking him over, sending him flying around the room. Betsy continued to endure the spirit's abuse, and after calling off her marriage to Gardner, Betsy was eventually courted by and married her former schoolteacher Richard Powell. Despite the apparent abatement of the witch's torment in 1820, she left the area with her husband and then settled in Mississippi. You can't blame her, can you?
No, not at all.
Really good. The witch also seemed to have a spooky hand in the death of the father of the house, John Bell, or Old Jack Bell, as the spirit called him. He was blasted with curses, heinous threats, and serious physical torments. As the abuse continued to impact his psyche, Bell took to his bed and was cared for by his son, John Jr. On December the 19th, 1820, John Bell failed to leave his bed, and John Jr. went to the cupboard to retrieve the medicine for his care. But instead of 3 medicine vials, he only found 1 vial. It was 1/3 full of a dark, smoky liquid of unknown origin. The voice of the witch gloated, "It's useless for you to try and relieve old Jack. I have got him this time. He will never get up from that bed again." She claimed of the vial that she gave old Jack a big dose of it last night while he was fast asleep, which fixed him, she said. The contents of the vial were thrown into the fire and erupted into a blue blaze.
Don't do that. Go and get them tested.
Well, John Bell died on December the 20th, 1820.
Oh,
Would the witch finally give up her haunting? Well, not until after the funeral.
what's the cause of death?
Don't know. There's no detail of that.
Okay.
As John Bell lay motionless in his coffin, the witch decided to wreak havoc at the funeral service, singing bawdy drinking songs as John's family tried to pay their last respect.
Amazing. Bawdy drinking songs. There was a man from Kentucky. Right, brilliant.
Tennessee,
Yeah.
Well, Ben, as if this story
Had
couldn't
to get up to pee. Sorry.
As if the story couldn't get any stranger, we also have an encounter with the witch and a soon-to-be US president. Did you know this bit? In the
No.
Legend has it that the Bell Witch even had an encounter with the then future president, Andrew Jackson. Jackson owned property on Red River and desired to visit the Bell farm after hearing the stories. One of his wagons became stuck by an unseen force and could not be moved, despite whipping the horses, examining the wheels and having it pushed by the men in his party. He exclaimed, "By the eternal boys, this is a witch!" To which the witch replied, "All right, General, let the wagon move on. I will see you again tonight." The wagon started of its own accord and they continued on their journey. That evening at camp, a self-proclaimed witch layer or witch hunter said he had a silver bullet and regaled the men with tales of hunting witches. Jackson whispered to his colleague, "I bet this fellow is an errant coward." Which I think
Brilliant. That's so. Yeah, don't listen to him. He's a telling tall tales.
Jackson went on to say, "By the Eternals, I do wish the thing would come. I want to see him run." After which silence followed. Suddenly there was a sound of light footsteps prancing on the floor, and the voice stated, "All right, General, I am at hand and ready for business." The witch bade the witch hunter to shoot, but the gun did not fire. The hunter was struck by an unseen force, claimed to feel the pain of being stuck by needles, exclaimed he was being grabbed by the nose, and then he fled from the tent.
Grabbed by the nose.
The witch exclaimed, "How the devil did run and beg. I bet he won't come through here again with his old horse pistol to shoot me." "I guess that's fun enough for tonight, General, and you can go to bed now." Once again, this thing of you can go now. I'm done.
Yeah.
The witch said, "I will come tomorrow night and show you another rascal in this crowd." Jackson was eager to stay, but his party had had enough, and Jackson returned to Nashville shortly thereafter.
I want to know what the other rascal was doing.
Yeah, or who the other rascal was. Now, some paranormal researchers have claimed to have found out the witch's kind of backstory, I guess. It involves Mary Kathleen Kate Batts. During her lifetime, it's claimed that she and her brother had arguments with John Bell over money, and that on her deathbed, Kate Batts vowed to return and haunt John and his family. Though this seems like a plausible explanation from where this spirit had come from, those in the know point out it can't be the case, as Kate Batts died many years after the events at Bell Farm and after the death of John Bell.
Wow. Okay. So is the rumour that she was a practising witch during life?
Well, this is it. I think we'll come on to that, because there is no credible backstory, I think, to this. I mean, there's the little bit at the start of, my burial site had been disturbed, but no real detail or backstory on the witch at all. And according to Tennessee State Archives, following the death of John Bell, the witch activity dropped off sharply. The spirit was still active through the winter and spring of 1821, but it soon bade the family farewell, telling them it would be gone for 7 years. True to its word, the family remaining on the property, Lucy, Richard Williams and Joel, claimed the witch did return in February 1828, reappearing in much the same way it appeared the first time, shaking beds and unexplained noises. It soon vanished again, claimed it would return to haunt the Bell descendants once again in 1935, but no other specific hauntings of the Bell family or their property, at least on the level experienced in the early 19th century, have been reported. Despite this unexplained activity in and around the Bell Farm in Adams, Tennessee, there's stuff that is still reported there. Various encounters have been reported near the property, along the old Nashville-Clarksville Road, and in the famous Bell Witch Cave, which still draws tourists and ghost hunters to Adams. The Bell Witch has been the subject of countless modern books, analysis, documentaries and movies, including the 2006 wide-release motion picture An American Haunting, which was very loosely based on the Bell Witch legend. Though the haunting of the Bell family apparently ended nearly 200 years ago, tales of the Bell Witch are as compelling now as they were in 1819.
And just so I'm clear, she doesn't manifest. It's just poltergeist-like activity and the voice.
Again, it's really hard because I think the legend has been added to over time. But I think from my research in its purest form, there are no sightings or descriptions of this entity. And
from my memory, that is one of the few deaths that was attributed to a paranormal force.
Yeah, correct. The John Bell incident. Yeah.
Yeah, he was recognised in court.
Yeah.
Okay. So, it's interesting there's no backstory because, again, I don't want to keep labouring it, but there isn't really a backstory to Jeff. It feels like it's something that appears out of nowhere, wreaks havoc, and then disappears.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's move on to what I was talking about earlier, because, perhaps that is the greatest true ghost story of all time. At least it's one of the most popular, right? And while I was working on this, I did keep thinking about Jeff the Talking Mongoose. Not so much direct parallels, although we do have a talking entity that seemed to have knowledge it shouldn't have, like the reciting the sermons, but the multiple layers of detail in the story. I mean, in the Bell Witch, we've got a two-headed dog, a talking ghost and poltergeist-like activity, even scuppering a marriage, paranormal murder potentially. Not to mention, although it's probably a bit more fanciful, an encounter with the soon-to-be president of the United States.
Yeah, that's pretty good, holding up his carriage.
So I guess the big question, is it true? Well, what we do know is the Bell family certainly existed and lived on that property. Whether they were plagued by a witch, who knows? Well, that story, The Bell Witch, is one of the most popular and iconic true life ghost stories in America. And that got me thinking, why? What makes a good ghost story? What makes this story lift above the rest? So I went on a bit of a journey to find out what are the elements that writers believe make the perfect spooky tale. I've been through a number of articles and papers by writers and academics on what makes the perfect ghost story. Let's start with Adam Z. Robinson, who is a writer and host of the Ghost Story Book Club. Now, Robinson identifies a 5-point structure to a good spooky tale, though he stresses that not all stories have this structure. First is what he refers to as the setup. It sets up the telling of the tale. I guess in the case of the Bell Witch, the family buying a farmhouse and moving in, that new house is a common ghost trope, isn't it? Mm-hmm. In this setup phase, you also need to establish doubt and credibility. And I was thinking the appearance of the strange dog in the Bell Witch tale does that. John Bell described it as a strange dog, and it was only later, really, that this idea that it had 2 heads was kind of mentioned by other people. But it was almost uncertainty because it's a dog, but there was something strange about it. Do you know what I mean?
It's a portent, and it adds that Sherlockian aspect to the story as well.
Yeah. The setup also foreshadows what's going to be ahead. In the Bell Witch, you get the strange sounds in the house. But the family at this point thought it was rats, or maybe looking for other natural explanations.
Talking rats.
Right.
Talking thespian rats.
Well, I think the talking comes in what's the second phase.
Yeah.
Of
First of all, it's
story.
scratching and...
So the second part of a perfect ghost story structure is called the arrival. This phase establishes the site or source of the haunting. In the Bell Witch, it's the house and the witch, I guess. In the arrival phase, there is an inciting incident. I guess in this story's case, the witch starts communicating with the family. So this is kind of takes it up a level from the initial contact, basically. Mm. The third part of a ghost story structure is called the encounter, or encounters in this case. The haunting continues. It becomes intense, scary, poignant and chilling. There is a point of no return. Certainly that's the case in the Bell Witch story, right? The witch ups their game, verbally and physically attacking members of the family, even preventing, weddings, basically. Mm. The fourth phase of the ultimate ghost story is called the denouement, I guess the ending, the fate of the protagonists and the ghost. I guess in this story it's the death of the father, John Bell, or murder of the father, John Bell, if you want it. And the paranormal activity then ceasing or at least diminishing, as if the witch had kind of somehow got what it needed or what it came for. The final phase of a good ghost story is the backstory, the ghost biography, why the spirit is here. I think what's interesting in the case of the Bell Witch, as we were talking about earlier, Ben, there seemed to be no real backstory for the witch. There's that disturbed grave, but, not much more than that. So it seems that over time, the folklore itself created a backstory. So that backstory of Kate Batts having arguments with John Bell about money and cursing him on her deathbed, this part of the story seems definitely untrue, especially given she died after John Bell and the spooky events in the farmhouse. But it was as if the backstory was needed, so folklore created one. That's what I thought. You know what I mean? Because it came later. And I think backstories for ghosts, especially real ghost stories, are really interesting. When we present a story to one another, one of us often asks the question, what's the backstory? What's the backstory?
Yeah.
And generally, Ben, I'm often relieved when there isn't one, as they often feel unbelievable or detract from the genuine nature of the haunting itself. There's something just too perfect about it, isn't there?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. It makes the narrative fits together too tightly, and you just get left with the sense that somebody has just made it up.
Yeah.
I mean, that is kind of the case you get with some of those hauntings. They get turned into Hollywood movies, and you just think, well, it's almost like you've been writing a script for Hollywood. The most believable ones are where it's just full of complete head-scratching moments where you're like, why on earth would that happen?
Well, that is the difference, isn't it, between fiction and entertainment in that sense. Especially if you're going to adapt something that is based on a true story, quote unquote, you need an ending and you need a backstory.
You do.
And not all ghost stories have that.
No, that's why some of the most persistent legends, they usually do have sort of a predictable outcome, like a banshee. You kind of go, well, who was it screaming for, and what is the family, and where was it heard? You know somebody's going to die, and so I think there's a real fine line between sort of fictional or embellished ghost stories and true crime. They feel like they have the same beats in them.
But I guess the difference, that's an interesting point, actually. I guess the difference in most true crime, you do get a conclusion, probably why it works well. There's a trial, there's a conviction. Do you know what I mean? In most cases, not in all, of course. There are cases that are open. But so, yes, maybe that's a really interesting point. True crime lends itself to a conclusion that is believable because there is one.
Yeah, that's right. And when it doesn't have one, like you take something like the Zodiac Killer, where you have this real mystery about the identity and the purpose and the motivation of the person doing the crime. I think that makes it almost a more interesting crime. But if you don't get to know who or why in the end, it leaves you in the same position as it leaves you with a ghost story, which unless you can have the biography of the ghost. I think that's probably why you were saying those researchers took so much effort to try and put a name to
find one.
The witch. Yeah, because there are so many serial killers who went to their grave and nobody knows who they are. Like, I suppose not a serial killer, but my favourite. So it's not really paranormal, it is a true crime story. It's D.B. Cooper,
right, and
the stealing of the money. You remember this story? We very, very touched on it very briefly. Basically, man on aeroplane. He says that he's got a bomb and he demands money, and he ends up jumping out the back of this aircraft with a parachute with the money. And he's never seen again. And it is presumed that he died. Some of the money was recovered, but not by no means all of it. And there's been loads of people who have been waiting for that deathbed confession, because they're convinced he's alive. Yeah, but the whole mystery of D.B. Cooper, once you get past the insanity of a man jumping out of an aeroplane with some money under his arm, is we've no idea who it is. What, that. It'd be much more satisfying if we realised that he was, I don't know, a wronged bank teller, or, somebody who was going to go and, he'd been drawing superhero cartoons all of his life, and he decided he would be a superhero. You want that click into place. So you go, it all makes sense.
Yeah. Well, that was my research into structure, but I was curious about people who write ghost stories or write about them to see what they think makes a good ghost story. I came across a short piece online that references, I guess you've got to describe him as the greatest horror writer of all time, Stephen King.
Yeah.
And Noel Carroll, a leading philosopher and academic who's written about the power of horror and what makes a good ghost story. I can't credit the article because there was no author on it. It was just something online. So apologies. I don't know who wrote this or put it together. But it says, Noel Carroll notes that the attraction of supernatural horror is that it provokes a sense of awe which confirms a deep-seated human conviction about the world, that it contains vast unknown forces. Carroll calls this attraction a paradox of the heart insofar as we are attracted to that which horrifies us. We are attracted to wonder, the sublime, the awesome, something before which we tremble in the recognition that we may be destroyed or at least be lost in it. It is terrifying in that it inspires terror, as do the deepest and most profound mysteries of the universe, for they rightfully put us in our place as insignificant, cosmically speaking. That's a really interesting point.
Yeah, that does make sense. And I think there's that sort of you could simplify that by saying that it puts us in the position where we're no longer the apex predator.
Yeah,
and I think that is deeply. I mean, that is why I think probably werewolf things are so particularly terrifying. You can, on the surface of it, something's going to come and eat you. But the fact that we've become so used to being top of the tree when something else elevates above that, that is just that is intrinsically terrifying to us.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Stephen King refers to horror as a dance of dreams. Horror, he claims, awakens the child in us, and he notes children are bent. He said children think around corners. Horror invigorates our imagination, requires us to think around the corners of life. In this way, horror helps us re-envision what matters most. King notes, if the horror story is our rehearsal for death, then its strict morality makes it also a reaffirmation of life and goodwill and simple imagination. Horror is conservative, and some things matter enough that they ought to be conserved. Horror challenges our norms, pushes them to the limits, and oftentimes breaks them to smithereens, only to have them come back restructured, reconfigured, and reinforced. So the norm emerges stronger than before. It has been, so to say, tested, its superiority to the abnormal vindicated. Oh, that's really interesting. And I can see that in Stephen King's work.
Yeah.
You know, he... maybe not all his stuff, but so much of it does almost have that perfect Hollywood ending. I guess that's why so many have been turned into movies or TV franchises, some better than others. But
And they can become life-affirming. Like, after watching Children of the Corn, I started making a lot of my own bread.
Right.
And no, but things like Pet Sematary and things, there's that. I mean, I suppose his term for it, life affirming, is one way of putting it. I think the other way of describing it is it's the horror has been defeated, and things can go back to normal, but you're left with that thought of, oh, but they could go back the other way, so you should sort of embrace what you've got now. It's that kind of standing at the bottom of Nakatomi Tower moment where, well, the terrorists have been defeated and John's with his wife. Oh, but there's one more terrorist left. Is that kind of, it's a classic moment.
Yeah, and I was actually, while you're talking, I was thinking, if you take something like Stephen King's It, that's very typical for him. It's not some kind of superheroes.
No.
You know what I mean? It's kind of almost people on the outside, people you wouldn't expect, you know, the kids who then grow up and have to come back and sort it out.
Misery.
Yeah,
same.
Misery. Yeah, exactly.
Pet Sematary, they're just cats.
Yeah. Well, Ben, this all made sense to me when it comes to fictional ghost stories. But I started to think, is there a difference when we look at ghost stories that are true, or at least claim to be true? And I just noted some subtle differences or influences that came up in my mind that make a true ghost story more interesting, at least to me. So the first additional factor relating to the true ghost story compared to fiction, I guess, is about the people involved. You know, this is a simple one. Did they exist? Well, in the case of the Bell Witch, the answer is yes, they did exist. There is also the question of credibility. So we are more drawn to stories that involve a certain type of individual, perhaps someone whose reputation might be damaged by going public about the story, right? It's why we're drawn to stories that involve police, such as the Lonnie Zamora UFO case, right? And I guess in the Bell Witch case, it's a prominent family who seem to have nothing to gain in sharing this experience, right?
Yeah.
And there's not just the idea of what these people might lose by retelling their story, but one we've talked about a lot, what they might gain. You know, if someone's writing a book about their spooky encounter or banking on a TV or film deal, well, it does diminish their credibility a little bit, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, that's why I tend to lean towards believing Bob Lazar.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't keep any of the money. I think I'm not going to muddy the waters, but you do get into difficult situations, like, for example, Travis Walton, who did benefit from his story, but then he seems so credible. But generally, I think you're right. When we started doing this, we said, you know, follow the money, and also if somebody is coming to you, I mean, like I cited that TV show I made about abductees. What shocked me so much was Not that I found it difficult to find people, but I found it difficult to find people who didn't mind being shown on camera. The amount of people I came across who had what sounded like incredible stories, and they were like, but I'm a, for example, teacher. My face can never be shown. My name can never be used, which obviously is completely useless for television.
Yeah.
And they want to meet in a cafe, and they will not have a camera anywhere near them. Like, what is their motivation for meeting a television producer in a Starbucks under all these conditions and saying, I saw this spacecraft land in my garden, I saw a creature get out of it, and it took me on board. But if anyone finds out, my career is dead. There's no motivation at all for them to lie.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this idea of follow the money, it made me think about Jeff the Talking Mongoose. You know, that fact that the family were offered a large sum. Can't remember the name of the person. It was like a circus or a kind of Barnum Bailey type person. But they turned it down, although possibly because they knew they couldn't produce a talking mongoose, maybe, rather than they didn't want the money. But you know what
Jeff? I mean? He's popped out.
Yeah, he's just got out for a bit. I think
I'm over here.
The next potential difference between a good fiction and real ghost story is kind of what we were already talked about, that ambiguity. You know, fictional stories like to tie up the loose ends, and the backstory element that we talked about earlier are really important.
Yeah.
You know, for a real ghost story, at least for me, it's tying up those loose ends that makes me suspicious. The ambiguity is a bonus rather than a frustration in a real versus a fictional ghost story.
But you know, you were talking about King there.
Yeah.
He is notorious for what's the backstory? It was built on a graveyard. That's the backstory.
Yeah. Maybe it's why he's so good at it. I mean, in the Bell Witch story, the fact that there doesn't seem to be a credible backstory to the witch, to me, adds to the mystery and the credibility rather than detracts from it.
Yeah.
You know, I think in a similar way, a definitive conclusion fits into this category. Do you know what I mean? So in the Bell Witch story, the paranormal activity seems to kind of just peter out. Okay, there's the death of the father, John Bell, but it didn't immediately end then. It just kind of just eased up. I mean, it's an ending of sorts, but it isn't a really good reason as to why it stopped, right?
No, not
it's
really.
More inferred than definite. You know, fiction would have given John Bell some deathbed confession, right, as to why they were all being haunted. And then the spirit would be satisfied by taking his life and would just move on, right?
Yeah, but I think that satisfaction of taking the life, I think that's us superimposing our presumed motivation over it. I mean, again, if you take something similar-ish, you take the Enfield poltergeist, you've got an entity talking through a child. Yeah. You've got the poltergeist-like activity. Now, it's slightly different because in the Bell Witch, it's in multiple locations and seemingly affects the carriage of a president. And in the Enfield poltergeist, it's contained within the building. But again, it's not too dissimilar. It comes along, it starts wanting to cause havoc. It then tells everybody what its own backstory is. And it doesn't want to go away. It doesn't. It sort of is both evil and pleasant in an equal measure, and then just one day starts fading away. There's no rhyme nor reason.
Well, but that's my point in a way. That's what makes the true ghost story for me more powerful than a fictional one, right? Because you would tie up those loose ends, wouldn't you? Definitely. The other thing that draws me to the Bell Witch story as a true account is that fact that there is no real description or sighting of the entity itself. You know, some accounts of the tale do describe the witch. You know, this ghost story, but is more about the action of the entity rather than the appearance. And I think that's more chilling, more believable, perhaps, right?
Yeah, I do. But I suppose the other thing that makes the Bell Witch so fascinating is the credibility given to the death.
Yeah.
If that was if that was kind of put as a, well, it might have been, but it was probably more likely that, I mean, they'd drunk something that was out of date, or they were an alcoholic or something like that, then that would detract from it. But now you sort of, when you really think about it, you look at it and you go, well, maybe the coroner just got caught up in the situation, and they just kind of went, oh yeah, the cause of death was by ghost.
Right.
Because you look at those Victorian causes of death, and they write things like nerves or persistent headache. So does it really add credibility? But that's just a minor point to it. I think everyone really loves a fascinating, like, it's that the Bell Witch is one of those where you can sort of turn the lights off and tell a tale, and also it's got a narrative. I think that is another important thing to mention here. Is so many ghost stories. I think there's a famous Mitchell and Webb sketch where he goes, "I'll tell you a story of the time I saw a ghost." What happened? I saw a ghost. Because that is genuinely all you can do is frame it. Like if you take the example you always talk about with my dad, who, if pushed, will say that he saw a monk. That's all there is to the story. You can describe where you were, what time it was. Yeah. And I saw a person. I don't think they were real. I think he was a monk. You can do it all in 10 seconds. It's not really a story. It's just a happening.
Yeah. I agree. And yes, I think that's a really good point. But it's reminded me a bit of when we went to Shepton Mallet and you saw that thing. That, I'm sure we could have made some, backstory about some prisoner who was in that thing. But, it just happened, right?
Yeah. They were a friend of Nigel Havers. They'd fallen, their career had fallen down. They got into prison, and now they were just desperate to be a thespian. Yeah, we could have put anything in, but no, it was just a black shadow. But I think that's the thing, is like one person's paranormal experience is as interesting to most people as when, they always say don't try and explain your dreams to someone because they're completely pointless. Explaining that, what I saw in the prison, to anybody who doesn't live within our circle of interest of the paranormal, they just kind of shrug and go, well, okay, whatever.
It's interesting, that kind of narrative that you talked about with the Bell Witch as well, because I felt it while I was working on it. So my first draft of this, we don't often kind of go too flowery in our telling of ghost stories. We normally kind of deliver the facts, don't we?
Yes.
And the first draft of this, I did almost in that fact-based way. And I thought, but hold on, there's something about this narrative, and we are looking at a great ghost story. I felt compelled to go back and kind of flowery it up more and write it more.
Yeah.
I'm no Stephen King by any stretch of the imagination, but I felt that pull of like, oh, I am going to write this differently to what I would normally deliver it,
Yeah.
Because it has sense. That narrative, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I think last week when I was trying to tell the story of the dog abductions, that is not interesting unless you bring in the human emotions around that and indeed the BBC interview. But most of our job on this podcast is to try and paint pictures of the mysterious things we read about, and then kind of, I suppose the denouement part of what you were describing, I always assumed that we'd be working towards a grand denouement where we would say, I think I probably know what all these ghosts are about, rather than what's actually happened is I'm more confused than ever about all of it.
But actually what we're saying in terms of the true versus the fiction, that would make sense, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Because, it just would be too neat if we could, put it all back together.
Yeah. Well, since I've started doing this, I have, you've probably found the same, I found people in our real life have started giving us ghost stories and telling me things and going, oh, this will interest you. And the more that happens, not to be rude to anybody, those stories are all great, but you could hear them sort of on any general podcast, which is why often talk about them. But like my family member who had the Peering House, that was a little bit different. But you come away from it going, well, the motivation of any of these things is not at all possible to predict or to guess or to even guess at in most cases.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. I'm not saying the Bell Witch is a true ghost story or not, but
good narrative.
But as we often say on the podcast, Ben, something happened to that family, and I'm not sure why they would make it up. I mean, whether it's true or not, it is an amazing example to me of what makes a perfect, quote unquote, true ghost story.
Yeah.
Let's end with a quote by the master of horror himself, which I think is a nice summation. Stephen King once said...
Oh, Stephen King, right.
Yeah. Stephen King once said...
Not Dustin G.
Not Dustin G.
Okay.
Stephen King once said, fiction is the truth inside the lie.
Fiction is the truth inside the... Oh, yes, I see what he was saying. Yes.
Which I quite liked.
Yes. Oh, that's the sort of thing my English teacher would have said, and then said, go and write an essay on that.
Yeah, you could have just done that line.
Yeah, that's nice. So are we going to talk a bit more about this in the Extra Scoop?
Yes, and I came across another interesting article when I was looking at structure of horror, which I'm going to go into as well. It didn't quite fit what I was talking about in the main ep, but there were some really more wider interesting points about paranormal stories, so I'll talk a little bit about that.
Terrifying. Well, that's very good. I do like the fact that you managed to bring Stephen King into this, and Steven Spielberg sometimes does stuff that's a little bit frightening, and I think I was watching this over Christmas, so Spielberg's first ever movie, Duel.
Yes, that's a great movie.
Yeah, and it only occurred to me when I was watching this time around, it's not clear whether it's a paranormal story or not. It's unclear. They leave it.
Yes, it is. Yes, it's open, isn't it?
It's open. Although you see the truck driver's foot once, you never see a face, you never see, again, any motivation. And there are so many stories that you can write in your own head for why this is happening. I think that's what makes it genius. But yeah,
I watched a documentary about Jaws over Christmas.
Oh yes,
and there was a fact I'd not heard before, which is just amazing. So I think it's on Universal Studio Tour. There is there was a Jaws thing where there's the boat. The I can't remember. Was it called the Orca? I think the boat was called, wasn't it?
Oh, I can't remember, but yeah, we're going to need a bigger boat.
The boat's there, and there's an animatronic shark, and people go on the ride, and that kind of stuff. But obviously, it is a working lot. Universal Studios as well, and Spielberg had offices there, and he was so traumatized by his experiences with Jaws that quite often he would go down to the ride and just go and sit in the boat to get away from everyone. And the tours would be going past and he'd just be sitting there because he, just trying to get his head together.
Really?
Yeah, amazing, huh?
So why was he traumatized? Because he was working with real sharks, or?
No, he was traumatized because the production was so chaotic and crazy.
I see.
The shark didn't work, and it was over budget. He decided. I mean, the main thing I think was he decided that he had to film it on the ocean rather than in a film studio lot with water, but didn't really kind of realise how difficult that would be.
Yeah. God, yeah, well...
There's some great bits in the documentary where he's going, they got the shot, something goes wrong. He said, but you've then got to get the camera boats, the lighting, everything back into position on the ocean to redo it.
Yeah. Goodness.
Which takes like 3 times the time.
And there's a potential as well that in one of those crowd scenes there was a murder, wasn't there? Do you remember this?
Oh, I had heard something about this.
Yeah.
We didn't cover it on the story. The other thing that most of the cast were actually inhabitants of Martha's Vineyard rather than actors. So they just recruited people, which I didn't realise.
Yeah. Well,
Interesting example, Jaws, of one of those where actually through necessity that not much shot of the entity or monster itself that actually added to it.
no, because every time you see it, even small children laugh because it's so bad.
Yeah.
It's so bad.
Bruce, the shark, was named after his lawyer.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That's very funny.
Yeah.
That's very funny. Right, well, we could talk about this all night, but you've probably got other podcasts to listen to. So
Yes, and hopefully Ben and Peter's Extra Scoop is one of those.
absolutely. Well, I hope January is treating you well. I hope you got through the storm of last week okay. And we will talk to you in a week's time.
Perfect. All right. See you
Take
then.
care. Goodbye.
Bye.
Are you the quantum mechanics?